There is a father somewhere in the Middle East. His name happens to be Jacob. Jacob has 11 sons. For some strange reason, he really adores this particular son of his, whose name is Yusuf or Joseph. Parents don't love their children equally. For those of us in this class who are parents, we know that you always love your first child just a bit more because you've had alone time with them for a year or two or three or four, and then the second one comes about and then you still love him, but just not as much. I don't know why Jacob loves Joseph so much more than all of his other kids. And that's something you should consider, that love by itself creates a great amount of injustice, that for some strange reason you give your attention more to some people and you're focused on them a bit more. There is also something very strange about this particular relationship between the father and the son, which is Jacob does not want to be parted, does not want to be separated, not even for a moment, from his son Joseph. He wants Joseph to be there all the time. And that's another element that love creates. You always want to be around the person or the thing that you're attracted to intensely, which we call love. Now, whenever you love someone or something a bit too much, unless you live in a cave, you're fine. But if you live in a social environment where there are other people in your community, love also has a sibling. It's called jealousy. Other people, or as Jacob had it, his other sons look at the relationship between the father and the son, and they become very jealous. They want the same attention that their father has given to Joseph all of these years. They want some of that attention. They want some of that care, some of that passion. But Jacob is unable to give the same attention, the same love to the other sons. Now, for those of you in this class who have ever fallen in love and you want to distribute this thing called love equally amongst your people, you can't do that. Love makes you monogamous, and in as much as you would want to try and will yourself to be the person of equality and justice, it's just never going to happen. Now, whenever someone becomes jealous or a group of people become jealous, and remember, you cannot be jealous without awareness. The moment you become aware that someone is giving somebody else more attention than they're giving you, this awareness brings about jealousy. And if there isn't much you can do about it, jealousy will grow into hatred, envy, resentment. So it's always good to be able to pretend well. So whoever is in your orbit, in your circle, doesn't become aware that you're focused on someone or something else. Okay, so you don't want to bring to the surface this thing that lives inside all of us, which is jealousy, that could lead to envy and resentment and anger and hatred and revenge. Now, the problem with love, as Rumi would say, for those of you who may not know the story of Moses and his encounter with Yahweh or Allah or God or truth, the moment Moses climbs this mountain and experiences Yahweh, the mountain begins to shatter or dance. And it's only because of the love that lives inside Moses. And the point that Rumi wants to make is the following. When you fall in love, you can't hide the expressions. You can't repress this emotion. It's going to come out. It's going to express itself in one way or another. And despite your best effort to repress this emotion, to make sure it's invisible, to hide it from the eyes of other people so that they don't feel inferior, they don't feel jealous, they don't feel angry, the truth is at some point it's going to come out. You're going to either act indifferent towards the other people in your life, you're going to write poems and they may assume that the poem that you've written is for them. So remember, for those of you in this class who may ever fall in love with anything and yet you have commitments and responsibilities to other things, you're going to find yourself in a really difficult situation. You know, you can't serve two masters, and it's absolutely true. It's correct, you can't. But should you be in the presence of those to whom you feel somewhat indifferent or somewhat casual, try to be as political as possible by making them feel as if they are relevant when in fact they are not. Now, Jacob has tried to hide his feelings from his children, the feelings he has for his son, Joseph, but it's not possible. And these kids become very jealous to the point of anger and hatred. So they go to their father one day and say, "Is it okay if we go hiking with our young brother Joseph?" And Jacob says no. I want no harm to come to him. Now, that's the thing you also need to understand about this thing we call love. It becomes sacred. You have found your paradise down here on earth. There is no other place you need to go. The person that you have fallen in love with, they become your church. They are what we call a totem. They are what we call Jesus. Only through him you can get to God. Once you fall in love, you have found your purpose, you have found your meaning, you have found your completion. And there is nothing else you need to do. There is no other place you need to go. And that is your sanctuary. And the moments you're not, or any moments where you're not near that particular sanctuary, you feel homeless and you feel helpless. And you feel alone and you feel isolated. And now remember, when there is no love inside you and I, we are nothing but a bundle of advertisements on the inside. You can do whatever, wherever, it doesn't really matter. But the moment you fall in love, it's like you put all of your eggs in one single basket. So that particular person or totem becomes everything that you are. If I ask you who you are, you say, I am Layli, I am my beloved. If I ask you where you're going, whatever my companion wants. There is this great story that comes from the Sufi tradition. I forget if it's Bayazid Bastami or Shibli. Someone knocks on his door and Shibli asks, who is it? And the guy says, it's me, Ahmed. And Shibli says, there is no Ahmed here. Get lost. And the guy says, man, you know, Shibli is my best friend. I tell him who I am and he says, he's not there. How is that possible? There must be a mystery to his response. So he goes somewhere in the desert and then he figures it out. And he comes back, knocks on the door, and Shibli once again asks, who is it? And the guy says, it's you. And now Shibli opens the door and says, welcome. And that's the student-teacher relationship, really. You can't have your own will, you can't have your own name, you can't have your own meaning and your own purpose. Everything about you must be everything about the teacher. And that's what Jacob feels about his son Joseph. So when the sons come to him and say, we want to go to Yosemite and we want Joseph with us, Jacob says, no. Without Joseph, I am nothing. Without Joseph, I'm homeless, I'm helpless, I'm incompetent, all that stuff. And the kids cry and cry and cry. And Jacob at some point says, fine, you guys can take my son who I love with you. One condition, no harm must come to him. So for those of you in this class who ever fall in love and you sacrifice a whole host of things for your lover, there is a reason. Once you fall in love, there is only one task that is on your plate, to do whatever you can to satisfy your beloved. It doesn't matter what you have to sacrifice, you will do it. You will walk away from a whole host of things. Now, true that maybe 10 years after it passes, you look back and you'll regret everything you have done. But that's the trick of life and the trick of the mind and all that stuff. But while you're there, you're okay with being a sacrificial lamb. Now, the brothers take Joseph not because they like Joseph. And this is something you need to understand about jealousy and anger. When you're jealous of someone or something, when you're angry at someone or something, when you spend time with them, you don't spend time with them because you like them. You somehow want to sabotage the relationship. And that's what the brothers want to do. So they take Joseph somewhere, and the plan is to kill him. Jealousy and murder are siblings. And by murder, I don't mean physically like destroying someone, removing someone's talent, belittling them, going on Facebook and saying nasty things about them. That's what jealousy does. Now, the brothers, of course, can't bring themselves to completely destroy their younger brother's life. So what they do is they remove his t-shirt and dump him in a well. And it's deep and it's dark. And they find a goat or a lamb or a cow or a dog somewhere. They cut the dog's head, spill the blood on the t-shirt, and they take the t-shirt back to the father, Jacob, and they say to him, we went hiking, Yosemite, El Capitan. The wolves came, they attacked us. I mean, all of us are scratched, all of us are bloodied, but Joseph died. You do have a house, you do have all sorts of things, but the thing that gives your life meaning and purpose is love. Jacob has lost the very foundation, the very core of who and what he is, his life. And what happens when you suffer a loss? You scream, you cry, you grieve. And in grief, you're always going to be alone. And in grief, you're always going to become blind. Because if the love goes away, and I'm not talking about the love that exists in space and space and time ultimately oxidizes the relationship. Now Joseph or Jacob cries and cries and cries and cries and cries until he becomes blind. When you become blind, you can't see. And it's symbolic. There are lots of people out there, but you're just not interested. There are lots of things out there that can bring, hopefully, meaning to your life, drag you out of isolation, loneliness, and despair, but nothing out there has the power to do any of it. Now, you can either weep from the inside, or you can weep from the inside and express it outwardly by the tears that you cry. Now, Jacob becomes blind. He can no longer see anything. So for those of you in this class who ever fall in love and all of a sudden come to realize that your life is slowly becoming irrelevant and without meaning and without purpose, and you feel isolated and alone, and no one can reach you, that's what love does. The entire world becomes irrelevant. The only thing that matters is you want to be next to your companion, the person that you love. In this case, Jacob wants to be near Joseph, but he's been told that Joseph is dead. What happens when you have lost the very anchor foundation to your life? Everything turns upside down. So remember, just in case you fall in love and you become anxious, confused, angry, and your life is falling apart, tough luck. That's what it does. No one has power over love. Now, Joseph, of course, is now in this well. It's way down, it's dark and it's deep. And what happens? When you want to come out, but you can't find a way out, you scream and you cry. And you scream and you cry, and you scream and you cry. You hope that someone up there can hear you. For those of you in this class who have ever fallen in love, but for some strange reason you can't be next to your companion, or you have lost a father or a mother that you loved, cared for, and there are moments where you just don't know what to do when you scream, or maybe there are certain parts of your life that are just not right, and you're just driving in the rain and you're just screaming. That's the well that you want someone to hear you. You want to see what exactly it is that's bringing so much agony and frustration to your life, but no one has access. It's deep and it's dark and it wants to come out, it just doesn't know how. So a couple of things you need to just remember, that this is just what we call the human condition, that all of us in this class have loved. We will grieve the loss of the things that we have loved. We desperately want them back, but we can't. We have no choice but to grieve their losses. You will scream, you will shout, you will cry, you will be in this dark well all by yourself. It is normal. You do not need therapy. Your best therapist is time and patience and good books as your companions and good friends. As Joseph is screaming, there is a shepherd that passes by, looks down into the well and says, "Oh, that's interesting. Let me drag this kid up." Drags him up, looks at him, says, "Wow, this guy's really a beautiful man. Look at his abs, biceps. He's like Cristiano Ronaldo. He's like the Greek gods. Maybe I should take him to Egypt and sell him." Do you know how many people have gone to school and have gotten their PhD in philosophy? Because they found something very attractive about Plato or Socrates. And in the end, they simply go to the classroom to make some money. They're not really very good at what they do. The only person who can appreciate beauty is the person who has fallen in love with it. No one else can. Marx fell in love with justice. We are just pathetic little animals who simply give ourselves the label communist or socialist or Marxist. For us, it's just a business. It's a feel-good thing, not for Karl Marx. So the other thing you need to know about love is that it is only valued by the person who has fallen in love with the object. No one else. Everybody else uses it as if it's an item on a shelf to be exploited, to be used. So remember, love can only be valued by those who have fallen in love, not anyone else. So the shepherd takes Joseph to Egypt and sells him. Now he lives in the prison of the Pharaoh in Egypt. Now Joseph has this ability, this talent that no one else does have. And he becomes known for the only person, only human being for the past 2 million years who can interpret dreams the right way. Symbolically, love is the only animal, the only beast who is able to provide, to create, and to interpret dreams. No one else can. The only proper interpretation of who and what you are can only be given to you by your lover and no one else. Who you are, how much can you sacrifice? Fall in love and you will realize your life means nothing. You're filled with compassion, empathy, forgiveness. You are like Jesus Christ. You're ready to crucify yourself. That is the ultimate perfection. There is nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. You are complete the moment you fall in love. Now, the Pharaoh has a dream and he doesn't know what to do with this dream. It doesn't make any sense for him. The thing you need to understand, dreams are profoundly important. They're important because they either come from deep within, that has nothing to do with your everyday life, or they have something to tell you about your everyday life, or they have something to tell you about your spiritual life, your future. And what we have in the story from many, many thousands of years ago is, should any of us in this class have dreams, do not simply dismiss them. They are telling you something about yourself and your future and your life. When I was much younger than I am now, as you know, I was working with this man for about 10 years or so. And once in a while, I get this urge of going to my journal. It was just dream journal. And once in a while, I look at all the dreams that I had. And he was, of course, a centerpiece of every single dream. And only 30, 40 years later, now that I read the book, I begin to understand tiny bits of what those dreams meant. But I couldn't decipher them way back then. I was much too young, lacked experience. But now the story is a little different. The point I'm trying to make is, if you have dreams, just write them somewhere, keep them. And 50, 60 years from now, you'll kind of understand what they meant. So the Pharaoh has dreams. He doesn't know what to do with this dream. He calls on everyone to interpret this dream, but no one can. And someone tells him that we have a guy in one of the cells in our jail who interprets, the inmates' dreams. Maybe you should ask him, and he does. It's about 7 lean cows and 7 fat cows. And Joseph looks at the Pharaoh and says, listen, in Egypt, there are going to be 7 years of famine where no one can have any food, any water. People are going to suffer. And then there are going to be 7 years of people can have anything they want because it's plentiful. And that's exactly what happens. Now, the Pharaoh has a wife, and you don't have her name in the Old Testament, but you have her name in the Quran. Her name is Zuleikha. By chance, when Pharaoh is having a conversation with Joseph, and remember, he looks at Joseph, he's not very attracted to Joseph at all. He is no Jacob. But as he's talking to Joseph, his wife Zuleikha comes in. And she has a feeling that she never had, or if she had forgotten the feeling. She begins to tremble both within and without. Her voice begins to shake. Confusion overtakes her. She becomes very anxious and very stressed. And she goes to, her palace, and she cries and she cries and she cries because she doesn't know what had just happened to her. When you fall in love, don't look for reasons. There are no explanations. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you have, if you're married, if you're single, if you have 10 boyfriends or girlfriends, if you have dogs and cats and rabbits. Love just comes to us and it consumes us. And it doesn't care who lives with us, who isn't alive. None of those things matters to love. Now remember, the problem with Zuleikha falling in love with Joseph, love just doesn't purchase parts of you. It buys all of you. It doesn't say, I will only occupy your mental space, but you can have your emotional and physical space. It doesn't work that way. Love takes your body, it takes your mind, it takes your soul, and it takes your emotions. You don't belong to yourself anymore. Now time passes and Zuleikha's condition worsens, but she's political enough not to express or manifest the way she feels about this young man to Pharaoh. But her maids, her servants know exactly what's going on, and they keep asking her, you are the Pharaoh's wife. You can't be in love with this servant, this slave. And Zulaykha looks at her maids, her servants, and says, you guys don't understand because you have never fallen in love. And once you fall in love, love forces you to look at your entire life and all the things you have accumulated. And love will force you to a realization that your life without love means nothing. It's been a complete waste. Now remember, it's much better for you to fall in love when you're 20 because you don't really have much at the age of 20. But when you're 60 or 70 or 80 and you've been married like Pavarotti for many, many years, and now at the age of 70 you fall in love, singing means nothing. Your kids mean nothing. Your reputation means nothing. Money means nothing. Now, because Zulaykha knows that talking to people who don't understand love, who've never experienced love, talking is a waste of time. Rationality and reason is a waste of time. I mean, how could you convince anyone why you have fallen in love with a man or a woman 50 times your age? Let them experience it. Hands on. You need to get dirty. You need to get messy. Like Job, that's the only way you can understand anything worth understanding. So Zulaykha does an experiment. She says, tomorrow, I know none of you in this house have ever seen Yusuf or Joseph, but tomorrow I'm going to have him come to my palace with all of you present, like 50 servants, 50 maids. I'm going to give each one of you a very, very, very sharp knife. And I'm going to give every single one of you an apple. And then you're going to stand in this line. And then the moment I say, Joseph, come in, all you have to do is look at him just for a second and then start peeling the apple. They say, fine, it's easy enough. And then the day comes, they're all standing in line, and she says, Joseph, come in. And Joseph enters. They all look at him, but they can't look away. At the same time, they have the task of peeling the apple. By the time Joseph leaves, the maids look down, and the floor is all filled with blood. Joseph was so beautiful, they had no idea what they were doing. They were not peeling the apple, they were removing the skin from their flesh. Beauty, it separates you from life. Love, it separates you from life. Life is a home to our flesh and our desires of our flesh. Love is something that connects you to the transcendence, to God, to something that can't be expressed, can't be defined, can't be described. I mean, imagine, you and I have spent thousands of years giving birth to language, and yet life sometimes creates for you events that can't be expressed through language, through painting. It can only be expressed in solitude, in screaming, and in crying. That's all. Now, you love a thing or two. Maybe you love soccer, maybe you want to be a dentist, but all of us in this class are born with love. Parents, friends, dogs, cats, video games, it doesn't matter. And like Jacob, all of us in this class, at some point, we will feel a loss, that we have lost something. We just don't know what it is. But this particular loss is not about a video game or a cat or a dog or a parent. Something about us wakes up for some very strange reasons that I don't know and says, your life is unfinished, it's unproductive, it's meaningless. Yes, you have some degrees, yes, you make money, yes, you are married, but your life is empty. That's the blindness of Jacob that all of us in this class have inherited. No one can escape it. It's impossible. And though you may sit in this class and not cry, you will certainly cry inward. It's called depression. Everything about your life is solid. There are no complaints, and yet you feel cheap. Now, sometimes you can see injustice. Sometimes you can see images from Palestine, and you can feel that way. That your life has centered around you, and there are bigger things in life than you. Kind of like what Spider-Man said to his best friend. Now, what is it that all of us in this class desire? Well, that's Joseph. He is the embodiment of beauty, of perfection. The problem with becoming a Jacob or being a Jacob, as all of us are in this class at some point, is that your senses become useless. Once your eyes go, there is nothing to look at and there is nothing to desire. Remember the saying, I think from the Gospel of John, if you were blind, you would be without sin. But since you say you see, your sins remain. I know all of us in this class have a purpose and a direction that we want our life to take. And the moment you say, I know, it means you see. And as long as you think you see, you're going to make lots of mistakes. To be blind is to sit and to grieve and to scream and to wait for someone to drag you out. And that someone is not going to be anyone who functions through their senses. Socrates is not interested in your body or mind. He wants our mind. But our mind is in a well. It's dark and it's deep. And he has to pull it up. And it's tough because we see too much. We assume to know too much. Remember, depression is a good thing if it's created in the right way and used in the right way. Now, we are Jacob and we are down here. Joseph is beauty. He's up here. He's like the mountaintop, but we are at the bottom. Between the bottom and the top is a desert. In the desert, there is no comfort. There is no rest. There is no solace. We are always on the move, assuming that this desert has something to offer us, when in fact it doesn't. At some point, our life, very much like Adam, it will get bored. It will want to sleep. It has no place to go. It can't find shelter, meaning anywhere. Now, as the famine hits Egypt, Jacob and his sons travel to Egypt. And the sons go to the Pharaoh to ask him for some food. But the Pharaoh eventually came to fall in love with Joseph. So much so that Joseph was now the Pharaoh. And as the father, Jacob, who is now blind and 135 years old, and all the 11 brothers standing there pleading with Pharaoh, they give us some food, Joseph, i.e. Pharaoh, comes to recognize the brothers and the father. But remember, you can't see the Pharaoh, you can't look at the Pharaoh in the eyes. Your head must always be bowed. Joseph recognizes who they are. But something very interesting happens to Jacob. Jacob is blind, can't see. Joseph hasn't yet spoken, and yet he smells Joseph. You don't see beauty, you smell it. If you want to know why you have fallen in love, your intellect is your vision. You want to figure things out through your mind's eye, but it's not possible. You have to be like a dog. Your nose begins to smell something beautiful, but your mind can't figure things out. And you know what Jacob does? He follows the smell. He doesn't allow the intellect, the whore of Athens, to interfere. I am going to be like a dog. I'm going to follow my nose. And he slowly walks towards a son that he assumed he had lost. By faith alone. You trust, you have faith in things you can't see and you can't explain and you can't express. And yet faith guides you.